Hey, let me know when you're ready. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Blank. It is my pleasure to introduce Will Casabon, our speaker tonight. And just to give you a little bit of background about Will, well, I don't know how many years ago, I got a call from a consultants network in Long Island, New York. And I was asked if I would form a new network in the Chicago, Rockford, Northern Illinois area. So I got started, and I got a lot of help from a lot of good people. And before you know it, we had about 60 members. And then things went pretty well, and I was asked to join a committee called the AICN. If you haven't heard of it, the AICN is the Alliance of IEEE Consultants Networks. And there's a CC that follows that. The CC is for the Coordination Committee. So the AICN overlooks all the consultants networks. And so I got involved with starting up several networks around the country. And I did about 15 or 20 of them. And one of them that I did was one in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I went there to do a meeting, and I met a gentleman named Will Casabon from the Indianapolis section. And he was there for the very first meeting, and he became the contact that I had. So by this time, I was on the AICN committee as the chair, and now I had a fellow named Will Casabon from Indianapolis who I enjoyed working with. Well, make a long story short, I went on to become a vice president in IEEE USA, and Will was following me. He became the chair of the AICN, which I was, and then I went on to become the president of IEEE USA, and Will went on to become the vice president in IEEE USA for Career Member Services. So I've known Will for many years, and he's been an excellent person to work with, and the first person came to mind when we thought we'd need a good speaker for tonight. So I'm glad to introduce this fine gentleman. He is from Indianapolis. He has a master's degree in electrical engineering from Purdue. He's been with the U.S. Navy Defense Lab for about 10 years, doing Naval Air Warfare Center, and he worked for a while with Hughes and Raytheon, and then mostly in industry, and he became a very well-known consultant in consumer electronics, automation, control, and did many things that I have on a long list here. I won't go through all of them, but I have him here as a section chair of IEEE USA Network, excuse me, the AICN chair, vice president for member services, I already told you about. But he's going to have to tell you a very funny story, because when I was president and he was the vice president, and we had a meeting, I had my members, there were about 40 or 50 of them at the board meeting, and I had them split up into tables of 4 to a table. And the mission was to do some thinking about the future of IEEE USA. And the mission I gave them was simply this: by the year 2024, what do you think IEEE USA will look like? What should we be doing? Where should we be going? What are the things we should be thinking about now to plan for the future? And the tables, there were about 10 tables, and then they all reported at the end of the meeting what they were proposing. And Will came up with a very wonderful statement that he can probably clarify for you. He said his table believed that in the year 2024, the Super Bowl game will be held at a new stadium called IEEE USA Stadium. And at this stadium, on the day of the game, the innovation will be given by the United States' new president, Gary Blank. So Will has a very good sense of humor, and that's the kind of person that I enjoy working with. And so he's here to speak to you tonight, and he is an entrepreneur more than anything else, and president of Casabon Engineering, and he gets involved a lot with family time games and things of that nature. So without any further ado, let me introduce Will Casabon, IEEE USA, how to start and expand a successful consulting practice. And William R. Kassenbaum is a professional engineer in the state of Indiana. Will, glad to have you.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction, Gary. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, we had a great time at that board meeting, and I think your instruction was to think big. And so we thought big, might as well push that envelope, and this, it's a good way to start this presentation in a way, because to start a practice takes a certain amount of chutzpah, and not only that, but to grow and expand it takes creativity and thinking big. Essentially, you can only accomplish what you can imagine, and the limits are mainly between your ears, right? So with that being said, I'm going to be going through some basic things, and there's many experienced consultants here, and maybe most of you. So hopefully there's a few ideas and tidbits here that will spark some interesting creative new ideas where you can go become curious and study even harder on them, or feel free to reach out and ask me some questions. But I want to go through some basic things in case there's anybody who's just getting started and thinking about this. And then I'm going to talk about sort of what the preparation is. Having turned the crank on a number of businesses over the years, what is the process you go through as you get started? So we'll talk through those things. And then there's some key things about operating and marketing and selling that maybe are things that we as engineers, that's not our favorite thing, but I'll sort of show you why you shouldn't fear those things, but they are problems to solve, which are just as fun as solving some of our more technical ones. And then I want to get down, so I'm sort of coming down from 50,000 feet to 20,000 feet to hopefully closer to the ground. So then I will go through a number of tools and specific techniques that I think might be helpful to think about, which will hopefully prime your pump and give you some ideas of things you could do to improve your practice or do specific things that will make your client acquisition more efficient and your operations and billing more productive and efficient. So that is the plan. So next slide, please. Okay, so I want to point this out. This came from Jacob Beningo, but I like this, and I think it's very important that we remember it before we launch into all this stuff. Remember why we're doing it. Real wealth is discretionary time, right? Money is a fuel it's a tool that you use. You can always make another dollar, but you can't make another minute. So make sure what you're doing is worth your time, and sit back occasionally and change directions if it's not being that way. Next slide, please. All right, so this is something that some of you have seen before. Yeah, go back one. There you go. So just the big picture here. This comes from Robert Kiyosaki's books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But the perspective is here that these are the business quadrants. Many of us start as the employee, and then as we think to become a consultant or something like that, we move to self-employed, right? So you have a job, then you own a job, right? Maybe it's not that much better. But as you grow a business, so it gets, S and B really may stand for small and big, but I also think of them as specialist and big business, right? So as you become a big business owner, it's a system that doesn't necessarily have to have you every second of every day for something to happen. And of course, the last thing is you can put your money to work so that you don't have to, and we sort of work our way through this process. Next slide, please. This next slide talks to this as well. We think of a B business as a money printing press. And so I think in my introduction, you may have seen that I'm involved in a retail store as well. So, I mean, things like this are, a business that can run without you every moment of every day standing in front of it or showing up. These things, I think many of us, even as consultants, we're thinking about this. Is there a product that we could sell? Is there something that we could productize? Is there, maybe we're working on something for a client that is in this area, so something that they are productizing. So it's important to understand that, where an S business, which most of our engineering consultants are, is a specialist business. If I don't show up to do any engineering today, or I don't show up to participate, there's no business going on. If you're a dentist and you don't show up, there's no dentistry going today. So those businesses essentially have, just like a job, you're trading hours for dollars. You have a limited number of hours. In the case of a B business, of course, you could be selling widgets, and it doesn't matter how many hours, it just matters how many widgets get ordered. So it may not be linear to the number of hours. And so that's a reason why you may move in that direction. But part of the purpose of this page is to, and we're going to be talking about terms. We engineers like to be specific about the words we use. So in particular, when it comes to money, we want to buy assets, not liabilities. And an asset is something that puts money into your pocket, while a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. So in many cases in life, it's not necessarily obvious to us which one it is. With this tool, you can start thinking about that. Is my car an asset? No. You need it, but it's a liability. Your house, your personal house, well, you need it, but it's not really clear whether it's going to be an asset maybe many years later when you see what it is worth. It may accumulate some value, but it may cost you a lot over the years to maintain it. So is it an asset or liability? It's maybe a little hard to tell. There's some things that are clearly assets. If you buy it and it can put money into your pocket, it's an asset. So the perspective is if you're going to invest money or if you're going to borrow money, it should be to buy assets and not buy liabilities. Next slide. Okay, so the basics, forms of business. And this is a slide that you might want to just remember this, right? So there's pros and cons to each. A sole proprietorship or a partnership is very easy to put together, right? It's because there's no structure at all, really. You can just get to work. In a sole proprietorship, of course, you're mixing it on your personal taxes. It's just you, but there's no limited liability. If you mess up, your house is on the line, or your car is on the line, your personal bank accounts are on the line. And in a partnership, if your partner buys something or takes on a liability or something like that, it's yours too. It's either one of you have all the power. So anyway, these entities aren't suitable for investment either. So it's simple. So in some ways, you got to get to work. But it's not good for investment. Limited liability companies are being used more and more these days for initial companies. There's some advantages. It can be centrally managed. It does have limited liability. There's taxes are paid. It flows through to your personal taxes. So you can take the losses as well as the gains. Sometimes that's useful. Sometimes it's not really. And it is suitable for investment. And there's a lot of new methodologies for how that's done, even for several rounds of financing if you're going to build a B business. Subchapter S corporations are quite often used for small consultancies. They're usually closely held. Only natural persons can be the owners, though, where an LLC, a company or a person, could be an owner. In the case of a subchapter S, they have to be natural persons. And there's a certain amount of corporate governance required since it's a corporation. So these are getting to be more sophisticated entities. The S Corp, like the LLC, the taxation flows through to your personal taxes. However, it can deduct more things as it's a corporation. And a C Corp is sort of the top of the heap here. If you are going to be growing into a big business and raising a lot of money, you're probably going to end up being a C corporation. There are pluses and minuses again with this. It's the most appropriate for taking on investors because they know what they're buying. But it has a wider set of expensible deductions, but it does require good corporate governance. And honestly, these kind of entities, as you grow and take on money, may get away from you. Once you don't own a controlling interest, it might be hard for you to maintain control of this entity. We're a limited liability corporation, for instance. The managers may still manage it even if they're not the owners. So anyway, one of my points here is everything begins with a customer. And I'll say this again later, but do you need an office? No. Do you need business cards? No. Do you need websites? No. You need pens with your name on it? No. You need a customer.